Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. This week, we're going to cover a couple of breaking Kentucky political news stories. Looks like I'm going to be getting a new state senator sometime. We got a Democrat running for one of the state's constitutional offices, besides Andy's reelection race. We're going to dig in on a few LGBTQ news items, hear some thoughts on allyship, and we've got an amazing returning guest, Kentucky writer and columnist Teri Carter, back and joining us from Anderson County, where we'll dig into a few more political issues there and her thoughts on some key influences on the last election. And then we're going to wrap up with a really important call to action. All of that, and theoretically, under an hour. We'll see what we can do. Keep it right around there, because you know what? We respect your time. We're glad you're joining us here on the internet or the podcast or whatever it is that you're interacting with us. But before we get into that show, we want to make sure that we set some parameters. You, our listeners, our watchers, our viewers, are you ready to help turn Kentucky purple? We saw what happened on November 8th. The GOP rode a wave of gerrymandered districts to bolster its supermajority even further. If we are going to match up the sensibilities of a Commonwealth who voted to uphold abortion rights with the political party that stands for abortion rights, our state needs your active engagement. If you want a Commonwealth that works for all of us, join Progress Kentucky, support our campaign to turn our Commonwealth purple, follow us on social media, share out our content with your friends and family, spread the word that we're tired of the GOP-dominated status quo here in Kentucky. We think our Commonwealth is truly worth fighting for. So now let's check in with our co-hosts. Let us know who you are, where you are, and what does your protest sign say today? Because, of course, we're not some news show on the internet. We are a digital demonstration for more compassionate Commonwealth. And the first thing you learn about a demonstration is you got to bring your sign. So let us know who you are, where you are, what's your sign say. I'm Aaron. I'm coming to you from Childsburg in Lexington, a wonderful Ball Homes cookie cutter community. And my sign says today, it's time for medical marijuana senators. Let's check in, though, around the horn. We'll start with Kimberly. Kimberly, are you there? Kimberly, are you muted?
No, I'm not muted. I'm Kimberly Cecil Jones, and I'm coming to you live from a very busy holiday home right now in Louisville, Kentucky. And my protest sign says today, Andy Beshear, put me on the marijuana council.
A shameless plug from Kimberly.
Yes, it was shameless, and I will admit to that because, hey.
Well, I hope
he hears
you, and I hope he does it, because I want your sensibilities represented in that body. Although I think are they still doing work? I know they did a bunch of stuff to get a sense of what they should be doing on medical marijuana and listening to the public. We had a couple of great ladies who both, I think, served on it in a recent show. But clearly more to be done. Hey, Willie, look, Willie.
Hey, there I am. Willie Carver coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky today. A little shinier than usual, but it's been a long day. I think this might have been my sign last week. I don't remember, but my sign is still, you are a part of this. It is super easy to sit back and consume media. I've done it myself. It is super easy to sort of sit back and look at the news and say, oh, this is terrible. But each and every one of us is a part of the larger body of Kentuckians, the larger body of Americans. And we have every single day the choice to speak or not speak, to do or not do. So just remind yourself, you are not a passive agent. You are making a choice, and if your choice is not to do and not to act, you're helping one group and not another.
Nice. What a wonderful, positive message. I hope lots of people listen, because, we need engagement. We need folks to take an active role. So we're going to now roll into news of the week. Again, we got a few stories we need to cover. One that I am very personally invested in. If folks saw, I think it was about a week ago, Senator Ralph Alvarado will be headed to Tennessee. So this guy was just reelected. You might remember one of our campaign corner guests last month. We had Josh Buckman, who ran a write-in campaign against Ralph Alvarado for Senate District 28. Well, Alvarado won in a walk, running against a write-in candidate, not usually that hard. He just announced he'll be rewarding the voters who put their trust in him by heading to Tennessee. So he's going to take the role of commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Health for Governor Bill Lee. So Alvarado, Dr. Alvarado, Senator Dr. Champ Alvarado, probably best remembered as Matt Bevin's failed lieutenant governor candidate, willing to step in when the always classy Matt Bevin dumped his sitting lieutenant governor, Janine Hampton, and chose not to have her on his ticket for re-election. He also, though, attracted headlines for his political defense of substandard nursing homes, right? These were nursing homes that, in fact, he was working for. Yeah, that's right. When it was exposed that a large number of nursing homes were providing inadequate support and care, Senator Alvarado stepped up to defend their negligent staffing and behaviors, which directly benefited him as a consulting doctor for half a dozen inadequate nursing homes. So there you go, Governor Lee. That's some really impressive, CV scrubbing there to find that, miss that information or not care. You're like, oh yeah, I think this is exactly what we need in our state health department. So really outrageous. A little bit about the district. It's a chunk of Fayette County, so that's my part of Fayette County. All of Clark County, all of Montgomery County, Menifee County, and Bath County. So lots of rural, kind of red landscape, a bit of purple. Since it's a special election, there will not be a primary. The GOP and the Democrats will select their candidates, who will then go head-to-head in a special general election. So that the process of selecting the candidates falls to the party themselves. That means, at least for the Democrats, the executive committees for those county parties will come together. They weigh the vote based on, I think, 2016 votes. So how much your county went for, I guess, Hillary Clinton, right, in 2016. That's how much weight you'll have in determining the candidate. So I don't know. I've never been a part of one of those. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But at some point, there will be a special election. So when, we don't exactly know. The Tennessee governor stated that Alvarado resigned his seat before taking his oath as Department of Health Commissioner, which is scheduled to happen on January 16th. Senate President Stivers says Alvarado will be in the state Senate for the first week of session, which kicks off January 3rd. So that does a couple of things. It means the Senate will vote when to hold the special election. So if Alvarado resigns now, it would be the governor who sets the date for the special. The other thing it does, it means I will not have a senator for the 2023 General Assembly, or the majority of it. That's scheduled to end on March 30th. If Alvarado did the honorable thing, he's already accepted the job, so he should resign as a state senator. If he did that, the governor could set a special election date, in a month or 2 months, probably 2 months, sometime in February maybe. So I have a couple of months of a senator. Instead, there will be a vacancy. There's no one to represent my views on medical marijuana, on abortion access, on public education, any of the numerous important issues that the GA will be taking up, which is, I think that's offensive. This guy who, such a proud public servant, and that's what drives his life, then why are you ensuring that your Senate district does not have a public servant for the majority of the actual, session? Really annoying to me. But at some point, there will be an election. It'll be a big chunk of that 4-year state Senate term. So who's running? We should probably think about the folks who just ran. So Josh Buckman, who I just mentioned, he's a social worker. He ran as the write-in opponent of Alvarado, just got like about 500 votes, but very hard to run as a write-in candidate. People don't really know what to do to vote for write-in candidates. Also, Tommy Adams ran for a state house seat in part of that district, the House 73rd district. He received, I think, 43% of the vote against the Reverend Ryan Dotson. Other names have been mentioned as well. Beth Mays, who was a judge in that area. And then I think the state senator that Ralph Alvarado initially beat for that seat, his name has been mentioned. I have zero idea as to whether or not he would seek that, but his name is, I'm losing it right now. RJ, I believe, and I'll come up with the last name in just a second. Former state senator RJ blank. Anyone know? No, anyone? All right, but this is not a seat that's been drawn for Democrats. Let's be frank, right? Ralph Alvarado was, an important politically connected state senator. He was not going to sign off on a Senate seat that took any chances with his reelection. This is a very safe Republican seat, but because it will be a special election, that means turnout is key, right? So there's a very good if there's ever going to be a shot, this is definitely the time. Special election. RJ Palmer, by the way, I think is the name. But is that right? RJ Palmer? Yeah, RJ Palmer. So RJ Palmer, if you're listening, and if you're interested in running, come and chat with us. We'd love to hear from you. But I think we will survey the landscape. We'll talk to Tommy. We'll talk to Josh. I think the initial insight I've got is that they are considering it, so we'll see what happens. But again, there won't be the only election for that primary election will be the one that happens in the county parties. So that's a little bit about that race. I know we got other races to cover. Races will be happening maybe in November of this year. But Willie, I know that you are that's your state Senate district as well. Any thoughts about that and how that's playing out?
Only that it doesn't shock me at all. Every encounter I've had with him, either as an educator or frankly as teacher of the year, even when they honor me on the Senate floor, showed me how disengaged I think he was from the entire process anyway. I was asking him some specifics about Senate Bill 1, which he wasn't able to answer. And I thought, this is your one job. To know the specifics about things that are going to be affecting your constituents. And he was not able to answer those. He also routinely refused to meet with teachers who were coming with advocacy groups. And, if you are going to represent us, then represent us. Represent the people you like, represent the people you don't like. It doesn't mean you have to choose what every single person wants, but it does mean at least that you will listen to us and be aware of what you're choosing, especially when it affects us.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Yeah, never got the vibe that he was terribly interested in anyone's perspective unless it already adhered to his political outlook, right? So I think with your rainbow glasses, he saw you coming a mile away, Willie.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine a world in which, even as a teacher with one single student, if I don't know, we were going to be voting on their 504 plan. I read every word of that. I talked to the student. I talked to their family. I made sure that I made an informed decision if I had the power to affect someone's life. I can't imagine voting for a bill and not knowing the words of the bill when there was that much opposition.
And say it one more time. What was the bill?
It eventually went on to become a part of Senate Bill 1. There was the caveat that basically said, if any teacher is asked to teach anything that makes them uncomfortable, then they will be allowed not to have to teach it, something along those lines. And at the time I could cite it, and at the time he'd never heard of it.
Yeah.
So I replay that a lot when I think about him, the fact that he was voting on it that day.
And wasn't up to speed.
Did not know what was in it.
Yeah, and it wasn't like it was like some non-controversial issue, right? This was like...
We were not talking whether or not frisbees can be in parks. No, we were talking about what's allowed and not allowed to be talked about at school.
Yeah. Party line guy. It would be awesome if we had a lawmaker that was, independent and just, was going to make up his mind depending on what was best for his constituents, not just what the party was doing that day to advance their partisan agenda. How about you, Kimberly? Any thoughts on Dr. Senator Health Commissioner Ralph Alvarado?
No, I have nothing to say because I have nothing to say.
Well, let's keep you off mute. You got the next story. Tell us who's running and what can we do about it?
Well, I'm so excited to say right now that the elections for 2023 is getting going, right? It's like getting that steam going on. And beyond the governor's race, which we're all very, very involved with, which has been getting attention for quite some time, and he's been getting a lot of money from me and others. As the GOP field gets more and more crowded, we're now seeing announcements for the other statewide constitutional races. Now, with that, a friend of the show and an actual colonel, a real life colonel that retired from the Air Force, is State Representative Colonel Pamela Stevenson. She has announced her intention of running for Attorney General, with Dan Cameron now running for governor. So that constitutional office will be up for grabs. And it is so enlightening. It's so promising and so good to see such a person, such as I call her Big Sis Pam, to be running for this office. I had heard quite some time ago from some sources that she was a definite pick to run for Attorney General. And I personally, knowing her as I do, know that she would be about the business of every last constituent in this state, not just Democratic, but everyone.
Yeah, she's been on the show a few times. She is a ton of energy, really thoughtful, really compassionate. And it's got just such an awesome resume. It's done a lot of things in the legal profession. She's got her military career as an Air Force colonel, and then obviously this will be a promotion from colonel to general. So I'm sure that's intriguing. But yeah, can you you work your magic, Kimberly, and make sure she joins us on the show sometime soon?
Of course, but I just have to tell you one thing. It's kind of like off target, but guess what I learned on Thanksgiving?
That you're allergic to cranberry sauce.
No, Aaron, I'm not allergic to cranberry sauce. However, we went to my uncle's house. He took all of us down in the basement because his hobby, now that he is retired, is like 24/7 genealogy. Okay. I just found out that Ulysses Grant was my great grandfather.
What?
Yes.
Wow.
He had a daughter, biracial daughter. Her name was Amy. Amy had my great grandfather. Okay. And that's how it goes.
Well, not what I expected to hear. That is not at all related to the story, but
I know, but isn't it like everybody needs to do that ancestry.com? I'm telling you, like my uncle, he's like made this like a full-time job. And so many pings come to you, and we have cousins and people. It's just amazing what has happened over this past year. And my uncle, he laid it out and presented it to all of us on Thanksgiving. And it's amazing. Like, I'm related to a president. Like, I'm related to the person that really squashed the Confederacy. Like, I'm feeling good right now. Okay.
Awesome. Congratulations. The 18th U.S. president. Impressive. All right, so we are going to move to our next story, I think. Willie, unless you wanted to weigh in on Colonel Pam or Ulysses Grant or either of those issues.
I was going to say, out of all the presidents on the bills, I've always thought that Hamilton was kind of pretty, but Grant, that's your hot daddy type right there. So a very handsome president to call your ancestor.
That's awesome.
That's why I'm so cute. Thank you, Willie.
Exactly
you see it. You see it. Don't I have some of his features? You see it.
I see it.
But getting back to Colonel Pam, like, she is the one. She is the one, because that woman truly, she's been on the show. What you see is exactly what you get. She doesn't change when she's around certain people. She's very animated. She's passionate. And you know, she is the one that will do what she says she's going to do. So if I was a betting woman, I put all my money on Colonel Pam, not just because I know her, but just her stance on everything, and how she feels, what she's passionate about, and what she has noticed that needs to happen in this state. So yeah, I would put all my eggs in a basket with her.
Yeah, she's a kind of a rare breed of politician for sure, and I would, yeah, I'd be honored to vote for her, and let's get her on the show. All right, so moving on, we've got one more story we want to cover. It's one kind of near and dear to Willie's heart, and so Willie, there's been a lot of things happening kind of in the news space around LGBTQ community, and wanted to kind of hear your thoughts about where things are.
Sure. It's definitely been a very big week, a very dramatic week for LGBTQ people. Obviously, that started with the Club Q shooting in Colorado Springs, which, rather than being the resounding moment in which people comfort, we end up seeing lots of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and other senators and Congress people doubling down on homophobic statements. In good news, we do have the Senate passing the Respective Marriage Act with 61 votes, and that includes support from 12 Senate Republicans. It did not include support from either of ours, Mitch McConnell or Rand Paul. And what I've been thinking a lot about with those two not supporting it, with the fact that we're even having to have this conversation, because as great as it is that we are protecting the rights of LGBTQ people to get married, the rights of people in interracial marriages to be married, the fact that we're having to do this in 2022 to protect us from a Supreme Court that is wildly going against the will of the American people is a problem. But at least with the Supreme Court, we know they're not up for reelection. So I can understand how the Supreme Court might choose to act recklessly, maybe not from a moral perspective, but I can understand it from a logistics perspective. If they want to go destroy people who they disagree with, they can do it without it making them lose office. But when we see so many Republicans voting against something so obvious that, and again, this isn't even enshrining the rights that we already have. If this passed and the Supreme Court were to reverse Obergefell, we could still see, for example, Kentucky refusing to give LGBTQ marriage licenses the way it used to, and someone would have to travel out of state. So we could still have second-class citizens after this. But the stats don't add up to the actions of even Republican elected officials. 81% of Americans say that gay and lesbian people should be hired to teach in elementary schools. 85% of Americans are in favor of gay marriage. The majority of Americans are in favor of LGBTQ characters being in books that are available to students in libraries. The majority of Americans even support having pride flags in the classroom. When we see all of this support, when we know the general stance of most Americans, why is it then that our elected officials can do things that are absolutely contrary to the will of the people? And I think it's because we don't speak. We do not speak up about it. I think it's uncomfortable when we know that minority of people who are anti-LGBTQ, who are anti-Black, who are anti-Brown, that those people are going to make a fuss. And I think sometimes it's a lot easier not to have those conversations for the sake of peace. But you do not create peace for LGBTQ people. You do not create peace for people who are Black and who are brown when you refuse to speak up in the interest of peace. Instead, the only people you're giving peace to are the homophobes and are the racists. I think we have to really start creating ways to make it clear to elected officials that we no longer want human beings to be politicized, because I think right or left, no one wants that. I was recently speaking to an organizer who is trying to pass the bill that would ban conversion therapy. And this organizer told me that there are actually more Republican sponsors of this bill than there are Democrats in Kentucky. I was shocked, and by sponsors I mean who willing sponsors should this go forward. And I was shocked and asked why, and the person said, "Well, because Democrats have more to lose. Democrats have no one telling them that they should be against conversion therapy. No one speaking up about it. So acting might create some problems, but not acting won't at all, unless of course we speak up." So that's my thought for the day. If we call ourselves allies of any group, if we call ourselves allies of the Black community, if we call ourselves allies of people of color, if we call ourselves allies of LGBTQ people, then we have to speak up on their behalf, because right now bad things are happening. And if you have a friend and bad things are happening, you speak up. That's kind of where I am.
Yeah, those are really important points, right? So talk without action, right? Or even, Facebook posts without verbalization, right? Like, I think it's really critical that, say the hard thing, the uncomfortable thing, get yourself into a little bit of trouble by putting your views out there clearly. Just wanted to say we did a quick scan of our senators' social media posts, and not only did they vote against the Respect for Marriage Act, they also did not say anything about the Club Q shooting. So, on Facebook, where Rand Paul is super active, talking about how, social media is, taking away the free speech of conservatives, which I saw on Facebook. He's also railing against vaccinations still, couldn't take a second to say something about this horrific kind of hate-driven shooting, just pathetic. And also on the kind of Respect for Marriage Act, I saw this on social media, so maybe it is, not true, but that's not the most elaborate way for Mitch McConnell to seek a divorce ever constructed, because of course it also protects biracial marriages, which of course he is ostensibly a part of one. So the fact that he voted against it seems like an odd statement. I don't know. There's a lot of chatter right now. It's mostly Annabel in the comments, just to be super clear. But I am pointedly ignoring Annabel's exhortations that I should run for the Senate District 28 special election, just because it's my Senate district. I run from office, not for office.
You have to care for it, though.
I did, in fact, ask Willie to run, though, and he said he wouldn't do it.
My husband has had to put up with so much advocacy and newspaper articles and everything else in the world this year. I think he would divorce me before Republicans made it illegal for gays to get divorced. Or what if they go in that direction if they really want to make marriage sanctified?
But I'll tell you this, Annabelle, if you want to run, we have a guest room. You can come in and register to vote, live in our guest room. I will help you on your campaign for sure, Annabelle. I think you would be a wonderful state senator now that you're legally able to vote. I don't know what the rules are about being a state senator, if there's like an age requirement for that, but all right. So we, I think, are going to move on. Very excited to be bringing on. All right, we're going to have to talk to my wife about you living in the guest room. I'm sure that the daughters would sign off on it, and I'm pretty sure that Bessie the dog would have no problems. But I do think that my wife, who, I'm not sure she'd be welcoming of that.
30 years. You have to be 30.
Oh, damn it. So close. We'll figure something out, though. We'll. I guarantee you this: we will have a better candidate than Senator Dr. Champ Ralph Alvarado. That's for sure. All right, so we're going to move on to our guest, returning guest. Very excited to have Teri Carter joining us. Teri, of course, if you read a newspaper, you run across her writings. She writes amazing columns about kind of issues of the day, bringing a wonderful sensibility to her writings, which she brings from, I believe, Anderson County, where she is ensconced in her deeply red county and experiencing all the loveliness that rural Kentucky has to offer, but looking at it from a progressive viewpoint. So that's why, we love having Teri on and sharing her views. And I know she's been thinking about the election and some key constituencies that played a very important role. So Teri, welcome back. I think you might be muted.
Muted me. There I am. Hey.
Hi. So yeah, thanks again for joining us. Always like to hear what you're thinking about if I can't read it in a newspaper. But yeah, we just on the other side of this thing. Elections aren't even final in some places, but we've definitely, I think we've learned a little bit about what the Kentucky, electorate thinks about a few key issues with this election. We saw, of course, Amendment 2 go down. Very excited to see our Commonwealth say, no, you know what? We think there should be a right to an abortion in our state constitution, which, of course, Daniel Cameron immediately just rejected as quickly as he possibly could. And then we also saw, unfortunately, that same electorate said, you know what? I think Rand Paul should continue to stay there in the Senate and be a joke backbencher, firebomb, bomb thrower, clown. And then we elected just a bunch of Republicans kind of all across the state at our congressional level, except Louisville, thankfully, kept we will have one Democrat in our delegation there in DC. And of course, the state house got just a wee bit more GOP supermajority, right? The supermajority got a little more super, unfortunately. But we did win some really important races, some really close re-election races for some people we cared an awful lot about. So, interesting mixed message, I guess, for me at least. What did you see in watching the elections, Teri?
Well, the first thing I want to say is I want to comment on something Willie said right before I came on, and that is about the Respect for Marriage Act and how McConnell and Rand Paul did not vote for it. And I look at that issue, people not being brave enough to vote for something or to speak up about something that's an important topic, whether it's in a local election, like a little county election, or statewide or national. I look at Rand Paul and I think, you just got reelected. Last year, McConnell just got reelected. They are in safe seats. There is no reason why they can't vote for something. And I have to say, back here in the May primary, there were some things that we wanted to do locally, and people would say, "Oh, you can't really get anybody to do anything before the primary. Nobody will do anything before the primary." So you think, "Okay, great, I'll wait." And then the primary's over, and then they say, "Oh, no one will do anything before the general, even in a safe seat." And so then the general comes. And then once the general comes, they say, oh, now nobody's going to do anything because they're in safe seats for 4 years. So it's over. So I do kind of start wondering, when do elected officials actually respond to their electorate? There's really no time.
Yeah, that's a shame. That's just that reality, right? There's, an absence of political courage. The thing that I will say about your point, though, it presupposes that Rand Paul thought the right thing to do was to defend, gay marriage, right? Respect gay marriage, and I don't know if that's absolutely true. That guy hasn't seemed to really care passionately about anything except for, again, being a crazy person about vaccinations, and he's pretty anti-trans. If we recall how he treated, health. I'm trying to remember who the doctor was, but she was on to discuss the pandemic, and he was really going after her for other things unrelated to her work as a public health official, because he's got a pretty anti-trans perspective, I think. So yeah, I don't know that he would have voted the right way. I think he probably thinks he voted the right way, right?
Well, I think Rand Paul, Rand and Mitch are obviously very different people, but I look at Rand Paul and I see the only thing that he does is try to get on Fox News or OAN or whatever the networks are now in the clips. So he is all day just trying to create video and sound bites to get himself on TV and radio, and that's it. Other than that, I'm not sure what he does. I mean, I don't believe his Fauci fights that he has on the Senate floor. I don't believe anything he says. because I think he's just looking for something to be dramatic and exciting and to be picked up on TV. I think he likes to see himself on camera. That's about it.
Yeah, I buy that. Yeah, I'm sure he probably is harboring more delusions of running for president, and like, yeah, the guy who, and we noted this in the show before, but back during the primaries, if you remember, Rand Paul was spending more time in other states than he was spending in Kentucky. He wasn't actively, he didn't have any real opposition for the GOP primary here, but wasn't, getting out there to talk to people. He hates Kentucky. The guy never spends time here. Like, he's got one office in Bowling Green, and otherwise you cannot find him in this state. Maybe the final month before an election he'll show up, but before that primary, he didn't have to be here. So he was flying around the country endorsing people because he's got some brand, apparently, fostered by these ridiculous clips on Fox News or OAN, and his dad's like rabid political following, I think, where he's trying to make himself a kingmaker in this kind of weird, narrow lane of Republican politics. But then if you actually looked at who he endorsed, they all went down in flames. I'm pretty sure like no one he supported went very far. So that, you would hope that he would take the clue and maybe refocus himself on serving constituents in our Commonwealth. But it seems like, no, he's hardwired to just be a jerk.
No, I think that ain't going to happen. That ain't going to happen.
Kentucky. You could have had Charles Booker, Kentucky.
You could have had somebody that actually does work.
Oh, well. All right. So what else? I know that you got another couple of things you were thinking about, and I want to get to it because I think it's a really important kind of intersection of our kind of, faith in our public life, where our church is right now. I think it's going to play a big role. It did play a big role in Amendment 2. What are you watching right now in terms of that landscape?
So for the last few days, I'm working on a new piece. I don't know where I want to put it or who I want to publish it yet, but I've been spending the last 3 or 4 days listening to sermons in kind of right-wing Christian churches, like the last 6 months of sermons. And first, I'll tell you that's painful in itself. But what's interesting to me, whenever I'm working on a story, I'm looking for 2 things. I'm looking for what's happening and who benefits. So when I'm looking at all of these sermons, I'm also watching the dates. So I'm looking at all the dates, this sermon happened on May 12th, and this sermon happened on May 22nd, and this one on July 3rd, and this one on October 9th, et cetera. And I'm looking at what ramps up before an election and what happens after an election. And it's been fascinating to me. In fact, there was one church that I was watching their sermons, and I noticed that, of course, there's a huge ramp up in the rhetoric about, LGBTQ and how it's, destroying the family. God's going to destroy the earth because of it. I mean, really, really hateful, horrible stuff. And of course, the election's over now. So there was a sermon by the same pastor this past Sunday. And I talked to a friend who goes to that church, and he said, it was a normal sermon. And I said, of course it was normal. The election's over. Because there's nothing to get head up about. And it's just fascinating to me, too, when I see, like there was a woman running here for school board. I had nicknamed her the litter box lady because that's what she liked to talk about a lot. But she also, somebody that I don't believe, even believed in public education. She believes that CRT is being taught in classrooms, all that kind of nonsense. And when I got her, how they do election mailers. When I got her election mailer like a week before the election, what did she have as her top 3 things about herself? She's ex-military. She worked for state government for X amount of time. And, she went to X church, or she goes to this church. Like that is a qualification for office, which screams like, vote for me because I go to this church. I don't understand that. I don't understand what it has to do with politics, except that it gets them elected. So when I look at my 2 questions that I'm asking, what's happening and who benefits? Well, guess who benefits by getting the people in the seats for the sermons that are just kind of almost, I want to say, kind of like a Trump rally. They're explosive and they're disturbing. And people clap and cheer. Well, what's that like? It's like a rally. And who benefits? People give money. And you need people in those seats. A big church is a business. And all the studies show that churches are having a decline in attendance. So how do you get people in those seats? You get them riled up. And what do they do when they're in the seats?
Yeah, I think, the intersection of politics and faith, I think is it's been around forever, right? Like, let's not kid ourselves, and it's been on kind of both sides to some degree, right? Obviously, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. To today, Reverend Raphael Warnock. There are folks who fight for social justice because of their faith, right? But I do think that that with Amendment 2 especially, right, on the ballot, if you looked at the the funders of that on the other side tend to be religiously affiliated, right? I think the Catholic Diocese of Kentucky was one of the biggest funders, which to me is a bit of a shame, as I do feel like remember what Jesus said about abortion. It's a lot like what he said about gay people.
Yeah, LGBTQ. That's right.
A whole lot of nothing, right? Like the guy, and gay people and abortion both existed in Jesus's time, right? It's
Of course they did.
So the fact that he didn't spend time on it, like, why would Christian churches be spending time on these things? Whatever. So they've lost the mark.
But they're the same thing. Like, if you look at abortion as a topic and you look at the LGBTQ issue as a topic, what are they both connected to? Sex. What are the things that we're not supposed to talk about? Sex, politics, and religion, right? So every sermon that I listened to the last few days, I'm also looking for those three topics. I'm not only looking for the religious message, the Bible, and all the quotes from the Bible. I'm looking for the political message, and I'm looking for the references to sex. There was one pastor that was talking about Ishtar. And, I'm not big on, I'm not really that well versed in the Old Testament, but talking about Ishtar, Baal, and Moloch as, three false gods that helped bring the end of the earth. And Ishtar apparently was called the Queen of Heaven and could change sexes. What's that sound like? Hello. Then there was Baal, who was all about riches and enriching yourselves. That's also another topic, a big topic of discussion pre-election time, and how, worldly goods are bad. And then there's Moloch, who was someone who sacrificed children on the altar. So what's that like? That's like abortion. So it's fascinating to me to watch the kind of, gyrations of these pastors try to tie things, not even from the New Testament, but from the Old Testament. Because if you go to the New Testament, you got to talk about Jesus. And Jesus is all about love your neighbor, and welcoming the stranger. So you can't, hate your neighbor and, hate the people coming across the border if you're talking about Jesus.
I've always wanted to do a quantitative analysis where I just take everything Jesus ever said and basically color code it. Like, he was 30% love people, 20% this, and then do the same to sermons. Like, there is no correlation between what Christ was doing and what fundamentalist American churches are doing.
Right.
And how that plays into politics. A journalist from Le Monde, which is the largest newspaper in France, actually came to Mount Sterling and interviewed me and wanted to talk about all of these sorts of issues that are happening with LGBTQ people in schools, in our public life. And interestingly, not a single Republican would speak to him. But that's a different story. Max Wise actually said, let me go talk to, let me go talk to our people to see if I can talk to you. And I'm like, who's the people up there?
Right.
But one of the things that's different about French society, and he was very kind about it, but he said, we're going to have a hard time understanding why anyone's talking about LGBTQ issues in school, because they don't mix religion and politics. And not in school, I guess there are legal protections to keep people from talking about things just like there are here, but it's really a moral issue there. People see the citizen as something that is separate from the personal, and the goal is to make sure the country is strong by not bringing in these personal parts of citizenship. And I think the irony is the reason I have to talk about LGBTQ issues in school is because I have fundamentalist religious people forcing us not to talk about it. So the only
Right.
way that they can counter that shame is to exist. And so they end up creating the very scenarios that they're afraid of because of how outspoken their hatred is.
Well, when I listened to the sermons the last few days, one of the things I noticed that's a connection, is an obvious connection, but between abortion and the LGBTQ issue that the pastors like to present is that both of those things prevent the furtheration of life, the continuation of life, the creation of a baby. So my question is, does that mean that all heterosexual people are only supposed to have sex when they're creating a baby? I mean, nobody ever really talks about that, right? And then I would argue too that, okay, so I got married 26 years ago now. My husband had kids. They're my stepkids. I raised them. He had full custody of them. I chose not to have a baby for that reason, because I had these two kids to raise. So is there something wrong with me? Would you put me in that category as well? Because I didn't reproduce. I didn't have sex to produce a child. Even though I took on raising these two children that didn't have a mother. So I just think there's more complicated questions that need to be asked. And, these pastors aren't going to ask them. They just want to talk about, the killing of babies, which is, all nonsense. And how, if you're, LGBTQ, you're not creating life. Well, but what about helping the life that's already here? They want to create new life, but they never want to do anything to help the life that's already existing. When I start seeing bills like that in Congress passed by Republicans, then and these pastors supporting it, then they'll get my attention.
I've literally said, one, Jesus didn't have any babies.
He didn't.
I've said the same thing over and over and over about the abortion conversation or any limiting conversation. Create for me a world in which every child that's born has a guaranteed right to get an education, will not be hungry, will not be afraid, will have people fighting for it. I'll listen to you talk at least, but until you create that world, I will not listen.
Right.
I would like to say something if possible.
Oh, hi, Kimberly.
Hey, I probably only have 60 seconds. You know how us girls, but all the guys, they don't always, notice us sometimes. So I have to just jump on in when I can, honey. But what I wanted to say, I wanted to ask you a question. Number one, because I've been listening to everything that you all have been talking about. I've been to the seminary. I graduated from seminary as well as the University of Louisville. And there's a lot of things that was going through my mind as we were talking. But number one, I would like to know what pastors were you listening to? Were they the evangelical pastors? Were there any Black pastors, any Hispanic pastors, Korean Baptist? I mean, that's going to help me out on what I want to say.
I'm only listening to white pastors because those are the pastors in my county.
Okay, gotcha.
And that's where I'm limiting my scope to right now, because that's what I know. I try to, I always get requests from people that say, oh, such and such is going on in Louisville. Why aren't you writing about it? Or such and such is going on here. And it's like, and I always say, because there are experts there that are living that and writing about it. I'm not there. That's not my knowledge base. My expertise is in, central rural Kentucky. And I try to keep that scope, and I try to stay on top of these people, and they know that I'm watching, and they know that I'm going to write about them. Does that change their behavior? I don't know, but it can't hurt that they know that.
Exactly. So, okay, I'm glad you told me that, Teri, because the other part of it, I just want to make sure that our listeners and viewers understand this also. When we talk about the Black church and politics in the Black church, it goes all the way back to slavery, how we had to sing and dance and perform. And also we told the master that, we were going to have our own service or whatnot, but actually those services were truly about God. Yes, the singing, the dancing, but also those were the only places that we could go at that time to actually talk about anything. The Black church has always been a stone or the rock of Gibraltar, so to speak. I know I said it wrong, but that's where businesses were formed. That's where social justice was started. We didn't really have all of these other places where a lot of Black people could congregate, but everybody would always say, and it's still true, 11 a.m. on Sunday is the most segregated hour of the week, right?
100%.
So, a lot of Black people get together at the church. Nobody's really thinking anything about that.
Right.
So that's where all the meetings were held, and so much more. So there are differences, a lot of differences. And, there's always been that tradition where political candidates always visits the Black church. And that just stems from that tradition of, hey, this is how we get our information. And a lot of people don't know that, or why that is, or why you've got reverends running, or even understanding about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? Because if you really, really study him, he was like a big, mad type of socialist, right? And he didn't mince his words. And a lot of people want to quote him. But at that time, he was one of the most hated men in America, and also from a lot of the Black race. Right. A lot of people don't know that. So I just thought I'd put my little 2 pennies in on my experiences, and also, the history that I know about why there is government politics, especially in the Black church.
Right. Right.
So I will say there's some troubling kind of political changes in the landscape, right? Willie mentioned earlier, Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's one who I think said very straight up, like, what's wrong with Christian nationalism?
Yeah.
Right. So could be that she's just an idiot and doesn't really know anything about Christian nationalism. That might be true.
No, I think these people all know exactly what they're saying. Herschel Walker is an exception, but I think except for Herschel, most of them know exactly what they're doing. And in fact, on the Marjorie Taylor Greene issue, there was a video clip that came out today of Madison Cawthorn, another rising falling star. But he said on the House floor, will you reclaim your masculinity? Will you become a man to be feared, to be respected? Or will you let this nation's next generation be its final generation? I think so much of this is about toxic masculinity and about men not feeling like they're men. And it's so funny, like I was listening to that and listening to these sermons. It so much reminded me of when I lived in Minnesota. I had a really good friend there that was paraplegic. He had been in a car accident when he was 13. And one day we were having this really kind of intimate conversation about what his life was like. And he said, there's only one thing people want to know about me, and they won't say it. They want to know how I have sex, or if I have sex. And if I don't, how am I a real man? And I think so much of this that we don't want to talk about is about men and their sexuality and attracting women, and about the incels that can't attract women. I think so much of the hatred of the LGBTQ community is that they're joyful, honestly, and that they seem to be enjoying their lives, and that they despise the joy, which sounds terrible, but I do think some of it comes from that.
I wouldn't doubt that at all. And I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is, I wouldn't say that she knows exactly what she's talking about, but I will say that she probably.
But I will say that she's very much like Rand Paul. She's just looking for a 30-second soundbite to get on the news because she wants to see herself on TikTok or TV. That's all she's about.
Yeah, that's for sure. She's definitely, as it's been said in a lot of places, this is an attention political economy more than anything else now. It's not about your ideals. It's not about the laws. Marjorie Taylor Greene could not read and understand a law. if it was written in 20-point type, right? It's she's
Crayon.
not got the brain to be a lawyer. That's why we used to elect only lawyers.
Right.
Now we elect, I don't know, Twitter trolls, TikTok stars, people like Madison Cawthorn, right?
Yeah, Madison Cawthorn, because who are Madison Cawthorn or Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene? All they are is that they're all like a 15 or 30-second soundbite and on video and carrying a gun and all that nonsense. I mean, that's kind of who they are. And if you ask them about policy, I promise you they could not discuss one bit of policy. And they don't, and you know what? Unfortunately, they don't need to. And that's what's really sad for the electorate.
They're just culture warriors, really, is what they are, right?
Yeah.
And make sure that everyone's scared and votes for them because they're the strong party that's going to protect you from the scary things.
Sure.
And they're going to make sure that you've got your gun and your AK, so you can protect yourself as well. That you're scared of all these things they've been winding you up about. But and I don't think that's really a faith-based conversation. I think Jesus said, "Don't be afraid." That's what he said. A lot of that.
I mean, I'm eternally fascinated by both the pastors and the politicians who they want to talk to people about, being afraid of, be afraid of the LGBTQ community, be afraid of CRT, be afraid of Black Lives Matter. They want us to be afraid of all these things, but you know what they don't ever mention us being afraid of are guns. Like Willie mentioning the Q nightclub shooting. Has anybody mentioned that? No, I didn't hear that in any of the sermons I listened to today.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I'm talking about missing the script, right? So we've gone long, trying very hard to keep us to an hour, but we're not going to do it this time. Teri Carter, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you'll come back, and I hope hang around after the show if you can for a second. I'd like to ask you something off screen, but I do want to just say we're looking for your column wherever it runs. Let us know. I've got a Washington Post account. I will share a free link to our Facebook page so we can click and watch it and read it from outside the paywall. But yeah, we'll talk soon. And I think we're gonna close out the show. We've got a very important call to action, so I want to spend a little bit of time on that. Kimberly, do you have the kind of current run of show in front of you? Do you want to do the call to action and then close us out?
I sure can, sir. I really, really can. So the call to action is take some action, right? Tell the GOP state Senate leaders to act right now on medical marijuana. I promise you, you will not regret it. And then also, we put a poll out on Twitter. 98% support the governor's actions, with some saying his EO is important and welcome. Some say it doesn't go far enough. Very likely that the current AG will challenge the EO. So while I get the sentiment that more needs to be done to make medical marijuana legal in Kentucky, this action already strains the powers of the governor's office. So it really does come down to state legislator to act. And in case you missed it, House passed a bipartisan bill last session, but the state Senate has been where hope goes to die in our Commonwealth. It's so critical we increase the pressure on Kentucky's GOP. The Senate supermajority leaders, Robert Stives, Damon Thayer, just all the creeps. That's what I call them. That's where you come in, ladies and gentlemen. We've launched an online action, and so far about 50 folks have taken action to send an email to their legislators as well as the 5 GOP Senate leaders. We need to top 100. We need to flood their inboxes. So please, I'm begging you, please, it doesn't take that long. Take action right now. It's quick, it's easy, and then follow up with your actions with a social media share or an email to your like-minded friends and family. Anything at this point, anything you can do to spread the word actually does matter. So that's one of the things that we need to do. And you know what? Willie is always a great co-host. And then, Mr. Aaron Viles, he is the best host this side of the Mississippi. Love him for real. So we will be back next week with Doug Price as a co-host. And, he is our election expert. And also, we're going to have another election expert on, and that's the democracy defender, the UK law professor Joshua Douglas. We'll hear his thoughts on the state of democracy in our state. So, once again, the disclaimer: Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State, organized as a 501c4, is affiliated with the Indivisible Project and the Commonwealth Alliance Voter Engagement, known as CAVE. Progress Kentucky's goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. And as I just love Annabel. Tonight, Annabel did the production of this show, and she's so talented and so smart, and we truly, truly love her. And thank you, Annabel, for that. And, you got to thank Nate Dogg. I like to call him Nate Dogg, but that's our very own Nate Orshan, because he provides the music. You don't see us dancing to it, but we do dance to it in the beginning and in the end. And you can, look at more of his content and listen to more of his songs on natosongs.com. That's NATO songs.com. Then if you miss our live stream, do not fret, my pet. We got you. Okay, we got you. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. We've got it covered. And in addition to that, if you're at work, you're in the car, whatever, we don't want you looking at us at work and lose your job, or while you're on the road and have a wreck. So we've made it very, very easy for you to listen to us. And we are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and basically wherever you're listening to your podcast. The logo and some graphic content was provided by Couchfire Media. So go check them out at couchfiremedia.com. So I just want to say, everybody, that it's been a great show. You made it to Wednesday night, so you made the hump. Okay, you did all right this week. Be nice to someone, be kind to someone, pay it forward. And also, everybody flood Aaron's email and tell him that I am the great, great, great granddaughter of a U.S. president, and I need a raise. Okay, my contract is up for negotiation. I love you guys, and you know what? Same bat channel, same time, and we'll see you next week.